And now we're also live on YouTube. Hello, Habibis, Habibtis, and Habib and Bees. Welcome to Exchange. We're doing Exchange both live on Instagram and on YouTube. Tune in on both or either. You're welcome. And you can also let us know if you can hear us, specifically the people on Instagram, because it's a relatively improvised setup. So if you can hear us, just say hey, whatever. You can hear us, I think, maybe.
Most of your family can tell us if they can hear us.
I mean, yes.
All
Just
right.
let us know.
I feel a real sense of accomplishment because we're both extremely technologically inept, but like in a really charming way. So we've managed two setups today, which is fabulous.
We actually did 2 setups and good lighting and stuff, which is insane. Yani, insane, but not as insane as fucking war crimes in the middle of, like, in clear sight of everybody. We want to talk about some things today, where empathy begins and where the boundaries of empathy seem to be. First off, you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that basically what we want to cover today is the normalization of the types of war crimes that a year and a half ago, had we heard about them, would have broken all of our brains to the point of not being able to believe them. We as a collective, as society, of course, would have had a very different reaction. But given the slow burn, or rather very quick burn, but gradual nature of the war crimes escalating and further escalating, we see how much we've reached this point almost without question and without complaint from the broader society. So we want to go into some of those structures and psychological structures and how they are exploited to get us to the point of this extremity of war crimes.
Yeah. So yeah, a new UN report just came out, and it says that in the past 3 weeks, Israel did 36 strikes where exclusively women and children were murdered. And the outrage is, first off, is very minimal if they're in the first place, because these things are not reported on. And we wanted to start there because the murder of women and children seems to always take the forefront of this extermination campaign that we're going through, which inherently demonizes Palestinian men and makes them unworthy or inherently violent and terrorist, and also deserving of the extermination of the murder that they're going through.
And I think what's most extreme about that is we've seen this the entire time as a dehumanization tactic. I mean, I remember already in the first few months of the genocide, there was a very clear narrative from at least our circles. There was an awareness of the extreme dehumanization of Palestinian men. There was a very concerted effort to humanize them in a way that played into this and does play into this concept of perfect victimhood, where they have to be loving fathers and caring workers and this and that in order to make them worthy of outrage around their being exterminated. So this has been the case the whole time. I think the fact that we're seeing it still to such an extreme degree is what we want to focus on, because after a year and a half of such dehumanization, playing into this trap of trying to convince that Palestinian men or any Palestinian is worthy and is a victim then becomes kind of harmful in how we use that rhetoric. Yeah. And ultimately it hasn't worked. And you see how much it hasn't worked. Because as you're sitting and trying to convince people that Palestinians are worthy victims or not deserving of being genocided, your start point is already faulty.
Yeah, you're giving compromises, as in like rhetorical compromises in your argument, where you're saying, yeah, but let's look, they're also murdering women and children. These are worthy victims in your eyes, which just says men can die. It's normal and also potentially justified because they might be militants, or they are branded as militants just from birth, no matter how old they are. They murdered a 17-year-old and they were claiming, oh, look, a 17-year-old, he's not a child. And to me, 17-year-olds are still youth. They know nothing. They are children. Also under like international law. Like it's...
But this is also the point where when does someone become an adult? When does someone become unworthy of being a child, which is kind of the litmus test that they have to pass in order for it to be a problem? I mean, a 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 20, 28, 32, I don't know, when you look at some of the heroic journalists, for instance, all of the journalists who have become really prominent and who have big Instagram followings and that people follow, they're all under the age of 30.
Yeah.
And some of them have kids, some of them are, some of them have left their family, well, they've all left their families in order to be reporting. When I look at any of these people, and this is not as a condescension or anything, they're all children as much as they're adults. They're all broken as much as they're the strongest people on earth, because that's what humanity is. That's what seeing someone as human is. It's a lot of different things at the same time, and they're a complete human in their vulnerability and also in their power. And by trying to distill down to just one of those characteristics, you, or the collective we, end up in a process of dehumanization.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm sorry, yeah.
And I think that's really key, because not just in how it's reported, but also how we as organizers and people active in the movement speak and organize has to be on the basis of unconditional solidarity, which applies no matter who the person is, no matter what you're qualifying them as, because the whole point is it doesn't require qualification. And what we're seeing in mainstream media and amongst government and ruling class narratives is that there is always a qualification. So when we're talking about this, we're exploring a lot of the nuances of that qualification. And as such, it becomes our responsibility next to call out why we're doing that and how that exists in mainstream rhetoric, in order to then say, I see that here. And once you start looking for it, once you start looking for, or once you're aware of how this victimhood is accentuated and emphasized, it's everywhere.
You see it everywhere.
Can't close your eyes.
And it's also like, we're also, at least if we do not acknowledge if we do not acknowledge the effects of this dehumanization and how it becomes intrinsic also in our rhetoric, then we are doing harm to the movement. We're doing harm to Palestinians by completely delegitimizing the existence of men. And through this, I want to come to the horrific story of, well, just the straight up insane war crimes of the Israeli government, where they, on the 23rd of March, the 15 paramedics went to do their duty, looking for people who were bombed by this settler colonial state, and on their way they were murdered. They were executed. They were basically executed. They were buried in a mass grave.
Zip-tied?
Yeah, zip-tied. One of the paramedics was zip-tied, his hands, his legs, and he was shot in the head. Many were shot in the back, and they were buried in a mass grave. Their cars were buried.
Their ambulances.
Their ambulance cars were buried, and it was like completely shushed. And when asked about this, the Israeli military fucker said something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, they were. We saw suspicious cars driving. Did not have any lights on. They did not have any sirens on, and they did not declare that they had a mission." And in the search of this mass grave, a phone was found that contained the video of this mass execution, of this massacre. And the last words of the Palestinian paramedic were, he did the shahada, the declaration that there's only one God and stuff, and then he apologized to his mother for choosing this field, this work field, and to help people. And of course, this is getting some attention, not enough to be honest, but it's getting some attention. And the reason for it is also the politics of appeal. Look, there was a man, which is like the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, he's a man, death acceptable, permissible death, permissible extermination. Then you come to, oh, but he was a kind man. How can this be? A kind Palestinian man that's so rare that it needs to be focused on, when this is one case of thousands that were not recorded, that did not get this media attention. And the whole point is, this is a strategy of extermination. If you do not see it by now, and I'm talking to my fellow Germans who still decide to dig their head in the sand and redo their fascist tactics from the 30s, and choose to not look at this, choose to not see the pattern of strategic extermination and erasure of even the value of Palestinian men's lives.
Then they are complicit as well.
Very complicit.
And I think, I mean, my therapist said this to me this week because that's probably an episode on its own, by the way, decolonial therapy and how we actually deal with trauma within Western frameworks and how we conceptualize it for ourselves and elsewhere. Yeah. Won't get into that today, but I think we should talk about that. But she said to me, I saw about the medics, and basically in a very kind of we were both kind of, I don't even know how to say this, like it was so cynical and it was so dark that we totally understood each other. She was like, frankly, at the point when it comes into mainstream media, where even just my kind of friends will hear about her, she's very revolutionary, she's very radical, but where it is kind of trickling into mainstream media, then you really know that the extent of it is unfathomable. Horrific, and we can't even imagine it.
Yeah.
And it was that is the truth. I mean, certainly this is reported on Democracy Now! It's reported, I don't think it's reported anywhere in German media. It was. And they said, I don't know if it was about the medics, but they said about the hospital was bombed last night. Hospital was bombed, Hamas claims.
Yeah, and the thing is, there was a reporter in front of the hospital while it was bombed.
And it was recorded live as he was narrating it,
And they're like, hospital bombed. The Spiegel did actually talk about this. Of course, in a very like both sidesing genocide way, which
Yeah.
is a classic Western media thing.
Classic for the UK and US. It's actually impressive that we've even gotten there in German media, who will flat out lie and lie and lie in order to just say, but anyway, I'll let
Yeah,
you
but
finish.
but that's the whole point. Your therapist was right. If it's even trickling into
Yeah.
German media who is not normally complicit, you have complicit bystanders
Yeah.
like I don't know the CNN, or they're also complicit, but they're way less complicit than German media.
Well, Springer Schießt That's what it comes
I mean,
down
yeah,
to.
yes, of course,
It's not just complicity. It's that they, and not just because they are active in horrors in the West Bank, but because the way that German media manufactures consent is so much more active than that. Like the BBC, for instance, they absolutely have blood on their hands. I've been outside, I've been at demonstrations there. But it really is something very specific in German media, and it's something that doesn't make its way out. The understanding of how extreme German media's narratives around this are, because it's in the German language and it's just, there's a bit of a shield. So people don't understand that the next level it reaches and the violence of how they report.
Yeah, so the in the at least BBC, like the comparison between BBC and German media, they're both state-sponsored media apparatuses, but the core difference is BBC, like there's a flip. BBC tends to do their journalism, as in they question power and then they release it. They question at least the British power in their very minimal ways, in their ways to appear neutral at least.
Right.
German media is the reverse. They get the line that they need to walk, the small line that they need to walk. They get it from the state,
Yeah.
which means it's not journalism. It does not count as journalism if you only spew out state propaganda.
Which, by the way, of course, is not coming from any kind of structured or democratic system of relaying. Well, yeah, it's not relaying any truth, it's only relaying state interest, but that can also come from individual politicians who throw a temper tantrum and say this is what's going to be reported, which is largely what we've also seen with the deportations.
Yeah.
Just fabricating stories because someone was so inclined and was, pissy because they woke up particularly anti-Deutsche one day. I mean, this is literally what we see. But anyway, I think a bit to get back to the story, not the story, the massacre of these paramedics, and just the way that it has not permeated but spread, let's say, at least a bit more than usual. I think it is so much a result of exactly how they've attacked the healthcare system, and how it has, of course, been a reproductive genocide, and how the main target of this, or one of the main targets, has, of course, been the healthcare system and been medicine, because their attack is on the very essence of the very requirements of being alive, of sustaining life.
Yeah.
So it's on the sustenance of life, and of course the truth on journalists. But what we've seen, and the main hospital in Gaza City was bombed last night, and was the last hospital, I believe, in Gaza City that was functional.
Yeah. Nusayrat, right? The Nusayrat. It was yesterday.
No, it was.
Wait, no. Yesterday.
It was last night.
This is okay.
But this is the fucked up thing. Is we're sitting like, which hospital are we talking about?
because
they've all been bombed, and they've all been And it's so normalized even for us, and I'm ashamed, frankly, to be in this situation of like,
Same.
oh, which hospital was bombed? But this really demonstrates perfectly the point that we've arrived at, that every single hospital has been bombed, and they've progressed from saying, of how could you accuse us of bombing a hospital that's anti-Semitic, to proudly claiming it and continuing to do it. And that's what they've been able to do is get everyone caught in the crosshairs intentionally to then be sitting here while they're just able to do it with no oversight and with no accountability.
Yeah, and like a year, a year and a half ago, when they bombed the first hospital, and then claimed to not have bombed it, and it was a very big media thing where it's like, who bombed it? Oh, who knows? Nobody knows. You know, it's like
the bombs fell from the heavens.
Yeah, bombs. It just rains bombs sometimes in Gaza, which is actually true. And they were like, no, it wasn't us, it was them, and whatever. They did the whole the dance around. And now we are at the point where they executed 15 medics, and in between this, every single hospital was bombed. And
Hossam Abu Sofia is still in prison for another 6 months, being tortured in a horrific state.
Yeah.
And there was a big wave
a hostage.
He was taken hostage. There was a big wave of protest. People came out, and all of the health workers who stand in solidarity with Palestine, the people who really are committed to it, they all came out and they organized. And then ultimately, they just waited us out. And that's what they're figuring out how to do. And it's not for a lack of commitment on our part. It's not for a lack of conviction. And it's certainly not for a lack of this being on our minds. Like, I kind of want to break that down too, because it is really, you hear often people saying, everyone's forgotten about Gaza. And that's not actually true.
No.
The problem is that it doesn't matter ultimately if people have forgotten about Gaza or have simply been crippled or outweighed by Israel and by the US and by the weapons and by the narrative that they have stuck to.
Yeah.
And that's what's required of us, is the same endurance, or much more lasting endurance, to outlast them and outlast their violence.
Yeah, but the whole point is it's like you're overloading a sensory system with images of incinerated babies and incinerated people and murdered journalists and destroyed hospitals and
beheaded babies.
Like the worst kinds of war crimes. And once you overload a human system, which is very human, you don't have any more space in your head to save. You don't have any memory in your head to save everything, which is a human limit. But I will say one thing: we will continue to document this. We will continue to talk about this, and Gaza will never be forgotten. And
I think
it is extremely exhausting. It's draining, but it is not even 1% of the horror that Palestinians in Gaza are going through, with the support of the state that we live in, that is reclaiming fascism as its Staatsräson, and an empire that wants to continue manufacturing weapons and uses the settler colonial ethno-state as an excuse to do the arms race on itself, with itself. Nobody's doing the arm race with the US. It's just the US.
And so this is a bit of a flow to a obviously very related topic, but something I wanted to talk about and share, because as we've talked about often, I think on this stream, and as I've also talked about a lot as an individual, it's really important to understand and connect with the humanity of the people the people you're fighting for. And so in the past year and a half, I've made good friends in Gaza, and my friend Marah is a dear, close person, and she's taught me an enormous amount, and she's also been a source of reporting, because again, as we've talked about regularly as well, the whole problem with the West monopolizing media as only reliable narratives through the idea that only reliable narratives can come from the West, and therefore Palestinians are not reliable narrators of their own experience.
Yeah.
By hearing about the experience, clearly, of the people who are currently living through the genocide, there is so much resistance in that for the people there.
Yeah.
In being heard, in their words being read, in their voices being centered, because that is a necessity of what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, of course you're a reliable narrative of your own experience, to break through the racism that is, of course, so overwhelming, and supremacy that's so overwhelming,
Yeah.
and how this whole thing is processed and narrated. Anyway, all that being said, the past few weeks have been really fucking dark, and they have only gotten darker, and that has been that's been what has been reported to me, and I think a lot of others from friends in Gaza, is it reaches new levels, and as you said, and as we all say, we don't see a fraction of it on our screens, because we can't smell, and we can't feel the temperature of the air. We can't see the darkness in how Gaza is physically darker as a result of all the rubble and all of the smoke rising from the rubble and coming down from the bomb. So it is physically, aesthetically darker than on the other side of the border. All of these things are not relayed to us. That being said, the horrors that we are receiving are completely overwhelming, and they do tend to shut people down. And of course, we really need tactics to refuse that. So what I wanted to share is, in the past couple weeks, I kind of internalized that realization. It kind of landed with me, where I said to myself, again, we can't feel despair, or we can acknowledge that maybe we feel despair,
Yeah.
but we cannot let it win in us. We have no right to do that. We cannot be dejected or demoralized to the point of inaction. That is a failure. That is, a result of the individualism and individualist kind of approaches of the state. Okay, you need to take care of yourself. No, you need to build a collective and strengthen each other and continue to fight. You need to get organized.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to, I'm sorry, this is going on forever. There were like a million aspects to this, but
I'll come
you'll
back
cut it
to
in a
it.
second.
Yeah, I'll come back to a few points. Yeah.
But what I wanted to say is, people are still on social media saying, we're so sorry. Please forgive us. What can we do? We're doing all we can. Please forgive us. Don't tell people in Gaza to forgive you. It's not about you. You're not the victim.
Yeah.
They don't owe you their forgiveness. And if you really think that you're at the point of being worthy of asking for forgiveness, you still haven't done enough.
Yeah.
No, you're not doing enough. And it's not their job, dying under bombs and starving in a genocide, to tell you how to support them and how to organize.
And not only this, it's not their job to make you feel better that you could not stop their murder. This is not their job. It's kind of perverse how it you put the weight of the murder of the person on them, the very potential, very likely murder through bombs, through hunger, through thirst, and you put this extra weight of forgiving you for not being able to stop it on them. You do not need forgiveness. You need to canalize your anger. You need to be active. You need to activate, and you need to have reliable people around you that can pick you up when you're down, that can give you the energy that you're missing, or that can take over when you cannot. And this is how you continue building a movement. It's not forgiveness that you want. I wanna touch on a point that you said about the complete decrediting of Palestinian journalists, and it is a continuation of a form of colonial ideology, which is the monopoly of knowledge production in general, be it history, be it literature, anything regarding knowledge is only legitimate if the sources are Western, if the
Are white.
are white. It has been this even in other revolutions of oppressed people. The people who write about these revolutions are mostly white, are mostly the part of the colonizers, and it's not that they're the only ones that write about it. It's that they're the only ones whose writing is accepted as knowledge production. Yeah.
Keep going.
Idea. Come on.
Okay, so my idea was also this is why the Nazi genocide, and particularly the murder of Jews within the Nazi genocide and not the other people that they murdered, is exceptionalized. Because it became and continues to become, in the way that it's presented by the West, as kind of a concretely reliable narrative, because the people who were murdered were white or white presenting, mostly white Ashkenazi Jews, and the people who are then reporting on it are also white. And that made the whole victim perpetrator merge and melt all the more effective and possible, which is why Germans can then come in and say, well, we're going to convert to Judaism. Look, we're the Jews, we're the victims, and therefore we're the reliable narrators of this genocide, of this story.
That our grandparents committed.
Exactly. And then as a result, they gain that kind of reliability or credential in their storytelling that allows them to completely push aside the oppressed, not by pushing them aside and ignoring them the way that others do, the victims of other genocides, for instance, but by just saying we're them.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the sources. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like there are only two acceptable narrators, and the German narrators take both. And that's the point. It was like you said, it's because the white presenting aspect of it kind of reduces how like the instant racism that you see, you know, like look at you, oh, you're white, which I know a lot about. It reduces the direct instant racism. Yeah. It only comes out later. And yeah, I also wanted to say, like, Palestinian journalists have left their families not only to report, but also because they were targeted specifically, and many of them were murdered with their families in their family homes, or doing their job, or on the way in a car, or sniped. This targeting, it's a continuation of this same ideology of knowledge or facts or reporting can only be acceptable by the perpetrator, which means that it is that the victims reporting about their own extermination can never be neutral, but somehow the perpetrator is always neutral. And this is, it's, yeah.
And I think this also really brings us to the reason why the number of journalists murdered in Gaza beats every other war in the last, in documented history, I think is, or to some degree something.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's combined.
Yeah,
it's
exactly. It's so
insane.
extreme because before digitalization and before all of this was live streamed and death streamed in front of us, the oppressor and the perpetrators of these war crimes, and in this case genocide, were able to stifle all reporting and all accounts of victims. There was no reporting coming out of Auschwitz. Yeah. There was no reporting coming out of any of these ghettos and there was no reporting. And so then afterwards, when people started giving firsthand accounts, they were able to frame them in different ways. They were able to relate to them in different ways. But the reason why this is such a threat, and of course, we're relating this to the Nazi genocide. Of course, there are all of the other genocides and all of the other instances of genocide and oppression in the global South, and where all of them were basically turned away or shut down as unreliable narrators. But the reason why we see, I think, such an extreme targeting of journalists and of the truth in this moment is because it completely breaks that paradigm of the oppressor and the perpetrator determining the narrative. Because at this point, they aren't able to control that anymore, which is why Hezbollah is such an unbelievable failure.
Yeah.
And it's why it's such an unbelievable joke. And it's why Meta has censored 93% of the requests for pro-Palestinian censoring that have come in, because they see that they are losing control of the narrative, and they really are.
Yeah. I think that was Human Rights Watch, right?
Yeah.
Like they did a really good report on the Meta thing. So yeah, the strategy of silencing is not working very well, and the strategy of Hezbollah is not working very well. So the only strategy they have is extermination, the murder of journalists, because it has been made permissible. There has not. Where are the German journalists' outrage about the murder of their comrades, the murder of their colleagues? How is this acceptable? And if this is acceptable, first off, I will also get back to this. This is acceptable to happen to them. It might become acceptable to happen to you, which, first off, should not be the reason that you're showing empathy, because like, what the fuck, you should be showing empathy regardless if it might happen to you or not. And second off, there has been a kind of a pattern of just repression methods being tested on Palestinians before being used against other groups that people in power want to oppress. And by this I mean, there is a movie I think called the Laboratory, Das Labor in German. It talks about how weapons were being tested. Specifically, there was tear gas weapons were being tested on Palestinians in Gaza during the Great March of Return in 2018-2019, and these same gas canisters were sold to the U.S. Police, and they were used against the Black Lives Matter movement in 2019, 20?
Yeah. 20. Yeah.
20. So this is number one, the weapons. Second, we have so four students are being deported.
One of them is a student.
One of them is a student. Anyway, 4 people who have residence permit here are being deported from Germany because of pro-Palestine activities. And just to, of course, again, the creation of the politics of appeal, they did not commit a crime. They do not have a criminal record. One of them is a student, and all four of them are not Palestinians. Two are Irish, one is Polish, and one is American, I think.
Two Irish, one's Polish, one's American.
Yeah.
All are here legally. None of them have convictions, and not all of them even have charges against them.
Yeah.
And I think what this very clearly draws on is the fact that they have been able, in the past 6 months and 18 months and years, I mean, this has been going on for years.
Yeah.
They have been able to kidnap Palestinians, Arabs off the street. They've been able to kidnap now Gaza genocide survivors off the street and deport them to Greece and deport them elsewhere by criminalizing them. And by the way, often, in most cases, they didn't actually have any more reason than they do these four, the Berlin Four. But no one really reacted to it, and people allowed it to happen because they weren't the perfect victims, and they didn't have the ability to appeal because in a super hyper racist country, how much does it really take to just criminalize a few Palestinians on the street?
I have someone asking, can you say the title, please?
Title of what?
The title of what?
You can let us know. But what I wanted to say is ultimately seeing the complete non-reaction that anyone had to them doing this to Palestinians and doing this to refugees and others outside of our community allowed them again to reach this point, to go through the kind of normalization process. And now they're doing this to people who are allowed to be here. And of course you hear it in all of the articles and all of the reporting, but they have no crimes and they have no convictions, and they are all they're all EU member states, and they have, this is a violation of right of movement. Yeah, it's a very blatant violation. It's very blatantly undemocratic and unconstitutional, as were all of the other Palestinians and Gaza genocide survivors who were targeted, who you didn't notice because...
Well, of course you should. Of course you should. But it should be, solidarity should be with everybody, not just with specific people.
I figured it out.
Oh yeah, they figured it out. Awesome. Thank you guys. But that's the whole point. You cannot do selective solidarity and then expect if you want to ask for forgiveness, maybe ask forgiveness for not being able to stop these deportations that are happening in your state, a state that is, by the way, that the last time has done deportations. They sent 6 million Jews and 600,000 Sinti and Roma and trans people and gay people to the extermination camps. And if you do not see parallels there of deporting people, deporting genocide survivors, in some cases, I think there was a case where they deported someone back
from Gaza who had spent, one I believe was 22 at the time, another was 28. They had spent the majority of their adult life in Europe, and they were then unconstitutionally, illegally deported, but no one really protested against it, back to Gaza. And they were there, it was a few months, I believe, before the genocide started, and then they were murdered by Israeli bombs.
So it fits the pattern of sending people into their extermination, into their erasure. And the sad thing is, it has not been highlighted enough. It has not been highlighted enough.
No, and look, I think
none of these cases.
None of these cases, and I was at a very, very good panel the other night, a very good event, where a Palestinian activist from Gaza, who I believe has lived here for quite a while, but told us a lot about the conditions, and of course the conditions before the 7th of October, the conditions growing up in Gaza. So it's unfortunate that the stream is lagging.
The stream is lagging, no.
Fortunately, I don't really have a lot that I don't know that there's a lot we can do about it.
I mean, Sure. Wait, let me check it out.
But anyway, I'll keep talking for the Instagram.
Yeah.
One of the points she made, which was just right on, and I believe especially apt for this point, and also in the very much in the same vein as what I was saying earlier about asking for forgiveness or asking what you can do. If it's been a year and a half of genocide and you're asking what you can do, it's time to do your own research, to do your own reading, to come up with your own ideas, to sit down and ask yourself, what can I do? There are a million resources out there. And I don't mean this in like a fuck off, go do your thing.
It's not a condescending
Not
way.
a condescending thing, but there are so many things that you can do, and what it really requires is that you take the initiative and you take the
Yes.
responsibility to think critically about it, and then to come into any activist space, with permission, with invitation, but really with an offering of, I have capacity, I want to help, not, and a step further than that, not tell me what to do. How about you look around
Yeah.
and you see something that needs doing, you'll say, I'll do that, and you take responsibility and
Yeah.
move forward. And this can be anything. This could, again, we talk a lot about strategic defense campaigns. We talk a lot about narrative intervention, and then of course there's going to demos, there's organizing, this and that. But there are ways of there are demo trainings, direct action trainings. There are so many things. And what she said the other night at this event, which was so powerful, is she looked at all of us and she said, because there are a lot of people who say, as soon as the borders open, I want to go to Gaza. She's like, what are you going to go to Gaza for? You're not going to help anyone. How about focus on how much work needs to be done around you locally in your community?
Yeah.
Because these are the people, these are the governments that are funding and making these horrors possible. So,
With your money, like
with your money.
with
So
your tax
that's
dollar.
your responsibility, is figure out how to fight exactly where you are.
Yeah, it's always the elephant in the room. It's in your room. It's not. The occupation is not just in Palestine. You are occupied. Your mind is occupied if you cannot figure out any way to help Palestine. You need to take initiative. Speaking of, maybe we disconnect this from Wi-Fi and make it just this Wi-Fi and this one data, or no? Is not
I
doable?
feel like that's gonna screw everything. We're booming, we're boomering especially hard today, aren't
yeah.
we?
Is the stream still lagging? Is anybody on the stream? Are you guys even there? Is anybody listening?
No, I think we got double whammy on Instagram and YouTube. I'm really sorry if it's lagging on. I don't know. Again, by the way, do work in your countries, because the infrastructure here is completely failing.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of shit that needs to be doing. There are plenty of ways to organize.
Yeah. Digitalisierung is not working in Germany. It's not our fault. It's not just that we're boomering. They're also, Germany's shitty internet connection.
But again, not to be too, I was going to say not to be too socialist about this, but I'm going to take that back. To be extremely realistic and kind of down to earth about this, why do you think the infrastructure in our countries are failing? And why do we think there's nowhere to live, and that there aren't, and that rents are high and this and that? All the money that should be going into the communities that we're a part of, into the societies that we inhabit, are being spent in the hundreds of millions or billions and billions and billions range on killing children in Palestine.
Yeah. They got money for wars but can't feed the poor.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what we want to highlight. Like, that always becomes the bottom line, is why does, when people ask you, what's wrong?
I think the stream is still lagging. Somebody said, yes, it's lagging there, and yes, there. I don't know. This is stressing me out. You want to connect I can hotspot you, and I have fast internet.
I don't know. I think it was honestly
Wait, let me check the stream.
Can someone tell us on the Instagram? Okay. Sam says Instagram is fine for me in the US. All right, then I think let's stick with this for now, because we have a few minutes left and I kind of want to wrap up.
No, we're gonna wrap up. Okay, wait.
Honestly,
Oh, that's you. Wait, it's not lagging here.
All right.
You guys are liars. Well,
Okay. All right. Look, we have a few minutes left. We'll get better internet next time somehow.
no, it's not lag. It's not lagging. Okay. We breathe. It's
right,
not lagging
fine.
anymore.
Yeah, but let's move on to the next thing. Like, and this is ultimately what we try and connect, because everyone active in this movement gets the accusation at some point, at one point or another, that not everything has to do with Palestine.
Yes.
And not everything is about the genocide. And not everything is about the fact that Zionists are murdering Palestinians, which, by the way, is such a completely sick, fucked up, ridiculous say in the first place.
Yeah.
Not everything is about the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have been murdered in cold blood.
Yeah.
Even if-
look. Don't look there.
Yeah.
You don't always have to look there. Look, there are other things to look at.
Completely a sick fucking thing to say to begin with. And I don't even feel like really dignifying that with a response, but we'll humor ourselves, because I think it's important for everyone to understand that genocide is the crime of crimes. It is everything. It is everything all at once. And the genocide in Palestine is at the center of everything.
Yeah.
And if you aren't standing in solidarity, it is the litmus test. It's always the litmus test,
Yes.
because it's ecocide. It's destroying the environment. It's a reproductive genocide. It's targeting women's rights and mothers' rights, and stripping and tearing apart families. It's, I mean, it's the... I don't know.
There is no subject that does not intersect with Palestinian liberation. Literally, there is no subject in, if you look at, like you said, environment, women's rights. Just speaking about women's rights, there are literal reports and movies about children being born at checkpoints. And if you think this is a normal thing, it's not. Like, it's actually, I swear to God, like, they made a movie about this and you're still silent. It's beyond horrific. We're talking about animal rights. Like, literally, they're using dogs to murder. They used a dog, let a dog murder a Palestinian person that has a disability, that has Down syndrome. There is literally nothing that does not intersect with Palestine. And if you do not see that, then you are choosing to ignore this intersection and wrap around it to be accepted in the hegemonic narrative, which means you are not anything but someone who is reproducing the same colonial bullshit that has gotten us to the point that you need to speak about. If we're talking about the environment, the same colonial narratives that got us to this destroyed, fucked up environment, which is the hyper-militarism of everything. If you choose to ignore Palestine, then you are I don't know, absichtlich, intentionally and deliberately trying to ignore one of the most horrific things to happen to humans and to happen to nature that you claim to care about so much.
And this is the most important point, is anyone who's denying that is only using it as a workaround and a distraction and propaganda in order to justify their looking away, or in order to distract you and direct you away. And there is deep evil in that, because there is also deep evil in complicity, and that doesn't need to be your intention, although in this case it is, but that is part of the reality. And that is also why we say very consciously and very often that Zionism and the end of Zionism, the dismantlement of Zionism, is an imperative for the future of this planet, for the future of humanity, but for the literal future of this planet. This system, or rather the world, cannot sustain this system.
Yeah. Yeah. And we will come to the point that you spoke about, like Zionism as a concept, and how it is so destructive to so many aspects of our planet and our lives, and how it shouldn't just be a right to reject Zionism. It is an obligation
Yeah.
to reject Zionism if you are a principled person with like a little bit of a functioning moral compass. You need to reject Zionism, and this will take me to a point about
This campaign, right? Was that what you were
yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
Yeah. I know.
Lost it.
No,
Oh my
it's
God.
fine. It's good.
I'm pissed now. Like, I'm literally pissed.
I
I'm
know.
imagining a white German climate activist, like fucking what's her name, Bernbauer or whatever the fuck,
whatever.
and just sitting there and saying, "Oh no, we need to we need to stop climate change," and then saying, "But I support Israel," which is like, just fuck off, literally just fuck off. You are not an activist. You are a puppet with someone's hand up your ass.
But by the way, this is literally what the German narrative around climate is based on, very intentionally, also fed by the German government. The German government and ruling class's understanding and framework for climate activism is you throw your recycling away, and meanwhile they're polluting and destroying the earth through hundreds of millions and billions of dollars and euros in bombardment and weapons deliveries and pure destruction. So I think this was also the point I wanted to arrive at, because this is something that we are working on, is the Right to Reject Zionism campaign. And there's so many different aspects to that. To begin with, the idea is that it is a strategic defense campaign that was launched on the basis that on a legal basis, everyone has the right to reject Zionism. Zionism is an ideology. It's not a people. It's also an ideology that is inherently expansionist in nature and in reality.
And racist.
And racist and supremacist and white supremacist and Jewish supremacist and all of these things, and settler colonial in character and in reality. And on that basis, everyone has a legal right to reject it. And this is, of course, also a bit of a battle against the IHRA definition, which equates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and, of course, equates Judaism with Zionism. So there always is a basis, and to build out on this basis is crucial, to say that we all have a right to reject Zionism. And then, of course, comes a bit of the corollary to that, which is it is not just a right, it's not just a legal right, because, again, we have our questions about international law, as we should. That's the nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
It is an obligation. It's an obligation to reject Zionism and to do everything in your power to dismantle it. And that is because it is the ultimate threat to the future of humanity, and because of what's happening right now, which is that in reality, in practice, Zionism is the extermination and genocide of the Palestinian people.
Yeah. And also, just another point, it should not mean the end of the planet for you to be fucking active and rejecting Zionism as an ideology that is now responsible for the extermination campaign of Palestinian people. If your empathy is, again, an egotistic empathy that stems out from like the selfishness of like, I want to save the planet for me, but I do not give a fuck about Palestinian children being murdered.
And Palestinian men being murdered, as we've covered.
About just Palestinians being murdered, then you are a racist, selfish piece of shit, to put it nicely.
And by the way, in these terms and in any other terms, because we don't police rage, because it is righteous rage and it is a mark of our humanity, and we fucking wish that more people were out here channeling that rage into something productive. However you want to say it, though, this is a really crucial point at this moment to make clear that the whole "you are next" argumentation is a failure, because it doesn't matter if you would never experience anything, if you would never be targeted, if you would never be the subject of repression, if you were never going to be genocided or deported or whatever it was. The fact is not you should care about it if you're next. The fact is, what the fuck is wrong with you that you don't care about it right now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
and I think in every instance, in every environment when we are asked these questions, that's what the obligation to me feels like kind of one of the central obligations is to say, why does it matter that the Berlin Four are being deported? I'm sorry, why aren't we talking about all of the people who have been deported up to this point, or who have been targeted? Are you so racist that you don't care about all of them? And of course, again, we can say it in any number of different ways, but the bottom line is it's not nice and it's not comfortable to be confronted with that. And the people that you're saying that to, it's not going to be comfortable or nice for them, because they are really sitting around looking for excuses to willfully keep their eyes shut.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you're not next, what does that mean? It's okay to commit genocide? Like, it's just absurd. It's the "you're next" argument implies that we have gotten to a point where society and people do not have empathy about other people towards other people, unless they might also experience the same horrors, which is an Armutszeichen. I don't know what that means in
actually either, but what I was going to say is it's a very, very logical result and consequence of late stage capitalism and extreme hyper-individualism.
The hyper-individualism. Nice.
Nice.
This is just actually, yeah.
Didn't we say the same thing earlier, by the way, when we were prepping for this?
I don't think so.
Not about this in particular, but we had one thing where
yeah,
we were
yeah.
A bit of brain combination.
It happens. When we were talking on the phone.
Yeah. Anyway, find your people, find your comrades, because then you really start building the basis on which you begin to really believe that we can change the world and we will change the world.
And we will free Palestine. And not we.
Palestine
will be free.
And we will be part of that fight.
Always. We choose the right side of history. You make your choice. And inshallah we see each other on that side of history. The right one. With that, I think we can say, have a good evening.
Free Palestine.
Always and forever.